Hi friends, this is Brian Russell. Welcome back to class. I want to talk about some of the common areas where I get feedback on surveys, in particular segment surveys. You can listen to this video after you've done a survey on your own or anytime you want to review or in preparation for doing your first survey. Now, some of the common feedback that I give, and I would encourage you to even maybe pull out the instructions for how to do a survey while we're going through this and see how this relates. The first thing is, in survey, make sure you're dividing your passage into both main units and subunits. So you divide a text into main units, and there's always going to be at least two. Now, the rule of thumb is you want to look for 2 to 4 main units. I say that, and I call it a rule of thumb, because if you needlessly proliferate main units, and you can look up outlines that have dozens of units, the more complex an outline is, meaning the more units that one finds, the less helpful the outline actually is in understanding somebody's argument. So for the most part in human communication, you can break things down into 2 to 4 main units, with each of those main units having 2 to 4 subunits. And again, this is a rule of thumb because, again, you're always going to have at least 2. So that's a given. But on the other side, can you have 5, 6, 7 main units or subunits? Yes. But just remember, if you go over 4, justify it, because perhaps you can combine something. So again, you may occasionally have 5 or 6 main units, but that's not typically going to be the case. Okay, once you've identified those units, to present them, you want to put them either into an outline form with Roman numerals and then alphabet. So Roman numeral 1, 2, 3 for your main units, and then with each of those you're going to have A, B, C, and that's so in other words a 2-deep outline, or you can use a chart, draw a chart, either a horizontal chart that moves from left to right, or a vertical chart that moves from the top to the bottom. And you can see the textbook by Robert Train and David Bauer, Inductive Bible Study, for samples of charts. Okay, simultaneously, because when we talk about structure, structure is both how the passage breaks into units and subunits, but it's also how major structural laws operate within those texts. And so you want to look for 3 to 4 major structures in addition to any recurrences that you note. Now, you'll always find recurrences, and especially when you're a beginning student, that's a great place to begin. Look for the things that recur, and as you learn structure, you'll be able to see the other laws easier, but you'll always be able to find recurrences. So now then, just after you find recurrences, try to look for 3 to 4 additional major structures that are operating in those. Okay, what's a major structure? And this is one of the key learning and growth points for beginning inductive Bible study students, because structure, as we'll see as we go through the semester, progresses at all levels. You have structures that may work at a segment level, meaning like an entire chapter. You can find structures that work within just a paragraph. You can even find structures that work within a verse or even part of a verse. So what we're looking for are major structures. And so if we're doing a segment survey, what we're talking about are the structures that connect the main units of the segment, or the main units of whatever portion of Scripture we are studying. There's another video that you can find in the Inductive Bible Study playlist on major versus minor structure. So if this is a tough spot, you might want to check that video out also. But again, the rule of thumb is a major structure connects, meaning works between in at least 2 main units, or if you have a really large main unit that's bigger than 50%, that the structure controls at least 50% of the material. If it's not, it's a minor structure, and if you note too many minor structures, you're going to confuse yourself as your survey, because we want to focus on the big pieces. Okay, always describe the structure that you see. Don't just write introduction and assume that I'm going to understand what you're talking about or even what you're going to understand when you come back to your work. Prepare your surveys so that you can pick them up next year, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, because I guarantee you will. And that you'd be able to understand what you're getting at. And also remember that in this class, I need to be able to evaluate your work. So if you just give a label, I have no idea what you're talking about. I might think I do, but I need to know. So give a 2 to 3 sentence description and make sure you're including verse references. That will help you, and it also helps me to understand what you're communicating. This is also important because maybe you're seeing something that's really there, and I may have a different idea about what the label should be because it's more about seeing the patterns than getting the words right. So remember that. This isn't some objective test. You can see the right pattern and mislabel it, but so that's why it's critical to have a description. Okay, once you find the structures, and this is very common, make sure that you write a set of questions for each structure that you find. And within that separate set of questions for each structure, make sure that you're asking all 3 types of the questions that we talk about. Definitional, ask, what is the precise and specific meaning of it? You're looking for the what question. What is here? What is involved? What is the meaning? Rational questions. Why? And implicational. You're asking, so what? And the easiest way to ask, so what is simply to ask the question, what are the implications of this? So make sure, again, for each structure that you ask a set of questions. You can use the generic questions on the structure sheet. The best questions would be taking that generic question from the sheets as a pattern and then adding some content from the actual text into your question. That makes a better question. And then last, make sure you're justifying a strategic area by linking it to a major structure. So you don't just pick a passage that you think is important and call it strategic because you think it is. A passage is strategic because it illustrates one of the structures that you found. Remember, the whole idea, the whole theory behind structure is structure leads to meaning. An author has a passage with lots of stuff in it. The structural laws give a body to all the stuff in a passage. And so you want to look for each structure, find a strategic area that represents it. Now let me give you a couple of tips. First of all, I really recommend that you schedule your time in 2 key ways. Work on your assignments over a couple of days. Inductive Bible study gets better when you give it time to percolate or ferment or essentially to grow. Every time you come back, you'll probably see some new things. So schedule your work in 2-hour blocks over several days so you can bring your freshest mind to the work. I know that's not possible for everyone, but if it is, try to make it happen and you'll be glad with your results. You'll find long term, if you're going to be teaching or preaching, this works best for presentations as well, to prepare over multiple days. If you need a new perspective, so if you just get stuck, you can't find something, you're not seeing structures, don't get frustrated. Get up, take a couple deep breaths, maybe go grab a different Bible, a different translation, and read the passage in a different translation and see if that opens up new insights for you. And then, of course, if you actually do find yourself really stuck and can't figure out where to go forward, relax. This is normal. It's part of the learning process. Observe your mind carefully. What thoughts are going through it and write them down. Write down what's confusing you, what's unclear to you, even what's troubling you. Get your thoughts down on paper because then we can work on it and then ask for help. Again, I hope this helps. I look forward to seeing your assignments. Thank you for your hard work. Let me know if you have any questions.